This conference will now be recorded.
TC graphics and weather briefings webinar for you. So Patrick and I are going to be covering TC graphics and then weather briefings. I know most of you probably know who we are, but just a little introduction again. My name's Leanne Eaton. I'm an emergency response specialist with Pacific Region Headquarters. And so in our emergency response specialist roles, we do everything from mitigating field problems and also being what you could say technical experts, I guess, on like kind of FEMA assignments or really anywhere where some sort of Pacific region wide person is needed. And so I'll pass it over now to Patrick to introduce himself. Patrick, we can't hear you. I still can't hear you, Patrick. All right, well, Patrick gets his, he was on just a second ago and it was working fine. But while he restarts and whatnot, he can introduce himself when he comes back in. But I'll just quick slide over to the agenda. So, just a couple opening remarks, introductions, what we're doing right now. And then I'll go into covering these TC products from CPHC, which include the track, wind speed probabilities, and time of arrival graphics. Then we'll have a little break, and then Patrick will go into briefing training, so some basics, useful websites, tools, etc. Then we'll have another little break, and then it'll be time for you guys to do a little practice briefing, and we'll show you the scenario at the end. And then these practice briefings we're actually going to send over to Megan Taylor at the training center, and she'll help review them and give any feedback back to us about them. So let's see if Patrick is connected yet, and if he's ready to go. All right, it doesn't quite look like he's connected yet. Patrick, can you move your head up and down if you can at least hear me? Patrick, can you hear us? Yes or no? Doesn't seem like he can hear us. Anyways, we'll just move on since I'm covering the first part here. And then if he can eventually get back in with his sound and microphone, then he'll be back in. So just first up in our session today, we're going to cover those tropical cyclone graphics that are being produced by the Central Pacific Hurricane Center right now. And so that is that track and error cone, the wind speed probabilities, and the time of arrival. And so I don't exactly remember when they were first put out, but it is in an experimental phase right now. And if you go to weather.gov/HFO/SouthPac/tropical example, that'll take you to the example page there. And it also has the links, the survey links that you should share widely with your partners and your public so they can get a feel for the graphics and provide any feedback for them for the Tropical SPT program. And so they're taking feedback responses through April 1st, 2020. And so if you guys take that, you guys have this slide set, and I'm pretty sure you guys have that link to it. But yeah, share that out widely with all of your partners and all of the public. But to get into what those graphics are, so that first set is the track and error cone. And so they're going to follow the same, following the same procedure that the track and error cone, how they're derived for NHC for that Atlantic and Eastern Pacific Basin, as well as what CPHC does for the Central Pacific Basin. And so how that error cone is actually made is that it's a set of circles placed along those forecast points, at 12, 24, 36, 48, 72, 96, and 120 hours. And that size of the circle is calculated from the previous 5 years forecast error. So, at 0.12 over the past 5 years, that error was only about 35 nautical miles. And as you get farther out into like 120 hours, that 5-day time period, then that, that error stretches to almost 200, or actually to 225 nautical miles. And so these are going to be available for both 3- and 5-day tracks. And they're produced following the JTWC warning text bulletins at that 3Z, 9Z, 15Z, 21Z, or that 4 and 10 a.m. p.m. time frame for Samoa. One thing though for these graphics, when we flip to the next slide, is that unlike the NHC Atlantic and Eastern Pacific, or the CPHC Central Pacific basins, on the ones created for the South Pac and on the ones that are being created for the West Pac, we're not including any of the watch warning coloring around the islands. And so this is the example that they show on the web page here. It's off of Herald, which I believe is actually back in April, but for some reason the date on the example right here is saying May, and I think that has to do something with if Maureen ran it later. She ran it in May, it might have grabbed May instead of April. But anyway, so this is the example from Herald. So you can see, the different points on it. Yours is going to be, it's going to show Samoan Standard Time, right, for the time that it is. I plotted it out here so you could see how those points are working. So this I don't exactly like this example. I'll just say that out loud because it seems like it was a system that was moving pretty rapidly off to the southeast at a pretty fast speed. And so seeing it, you don't get the full actualization of those circles, right? If you're looking at it, it kind of looks like all the circles are the same size, but they're not. It's just over, really, it's over almost 20 degrees of latitude. And so you're looking at something really zoomed out. But so I plotted it off in Google Earth here. And so these circles, the red circles are the sizes that for the error cone that it would be. And so you can see how that image was created here by plotting those circles, and then pretty much they trace around the circles there. And so I did a couple other examples. And so this would have been from GITO, what it would have looked like from the first advisory, from that first warning package that JTWC put out. So you can see, the 0Z spot, and then as it, all the way through 120 hours, what a sort of rough form TC cone graphic would have looked like if you had the CPHC type products. And so you can see, the error cone only about 25 nautical miles down at hour 12, going all the way up to the 225 nautical miles out at 120 hours, right? And so if we were looking at this, you could see that American Samoa was falling somewhere within that cone, especially for the first 24-hour time frame. And then, so I did one other example here. This is from TC Amos, I think back in 2015 or maybe 16, but just again showing how those circles and how the cone would have been with the different forecast points. And so for this one, you see the recurving back off to the east and those circles kind of overlapping. So it would have been kind of this thicker, curvature in the beginning and then expanding open to that 120. So you would have seen, for American Samoa, you've been looking at sometime in that 4 to 5 day range with that cone really expanding over your area. And so that's how the track and error cones are derived. So it takes those, just to review again, it takes the past 5 years error to derive those, to derive the size of the circle for each forecast point. And it's using 2/3. I guess I don't think I actually covered this. Let's go back to that first slide. So the circle actually encloses 2/3 or 67% of the previous 5 years forecast errors. And so that's how they get the size of what the cone is going to be. So 2/3 of the time, some system fell within that size error cone. So that's how the cones and tracks are made. The tracks obviously are coming from the JTWC forecast, and then how the cones are made. But if anybody's got any questions now, you can either put them in the chat or you can speak up before I move on to the wind speed probabilities.
Hi, Leanne, it's Hans. You know, for the since it's averaging out the last 5 years, I think some of the forecast doesn't include the other major hurricanes that we observe passing the 5-year period. So,
Yeah, so it's so every year they're gonna take those 5 years. So next year you could see the error cone size change just a little bit depending on how well the forecasts were, say from 2021, 2022 timeframe.
And then the other thing that there are some years that it's not active, and then there are some years that are it's really active. So
right, and so that's why so that's why they take that 5 year to try to encompass an active year or not active year, right? Instead of just going off of, say, last year's errors that you may not have seen too many systems or you saw a lot, right?
Do you know why they use 5 years instead of 10 years or more?
I do not know why they use 5 or 10, etc. I think they might. I don't know if 10 years just adds too much noise into it or not.
okay.
I don't know if that's truth or not. That's just an idea.
Leanne?
Yeah, Ashley?
So I think that was down in Pongo Pongo. So NHC had done a study and they showed that 5 years, 5-year running average produced the best. It was the best solution set versus 10 years. 10 years, as Leanne said, tended to introduce a little bit too much noise. So they had done a study, and so that's what was adopted to use for all of the basins. Over.
Great, thanks, Ash.
Thank you, Ash. So, because as you stated, it works for NHC, so that rule is then just assumed to work for us as well, although we may have different frequencies in systems.
Then for my office study, there was a study done for us.
Oh, it's a study for us or NHC? NHC.
For my was a study that they did for us.
The NHC
So
did for us.
NHC did a study as they developed these for all study. Study might be too strong of a word because I don't think it was published, but they did some work. They did, there at NHC for all of the basins as they were developing this. Now, there's nothing to say that we in the future, excuse me, if we determine that 5 years is not, understanding that this is new, relatively speaking, South Pack and for West Pack, that we can go back and redress against that. So we just have to, and keep an eye on it and develop the background material and the statistics then to go back and say, hey, 5 years isn't actually good for South Pack or West Pack. It could be 3 years, it could be 10 years, it might even be 20 years, depending on the data set that you develop. Does that sort of set the stage and answer the question, Eleanor? Over.
Oh yeah, it's perfect because this also helps us when we do get those types of questions from our partners. We can definitely provide the same answer. Thank you, Ash.
So I would say, Eleanor, the thing to say is, right now it's the state of the science that we have in terms of answers, and we continue to look at it and address it as we move into the future. And it gets looked at very often. I mean, the scientific capital back there at NHC, they're so engrossed in looking at tropical cyclones around the globe, and JTWC has capital that's looking at that in West Pack and South Pack as well, because they have vested interest there as well. Over.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ash. And to remember, it's not just the systems that are right next to American Samoa. They're taking a broader area across the South Pacific to get those error numbers. So like Hans, you were saying, well, what if there's only a couple that were by American Samoa? It's the broader South Pacific area. All right, so thank you for all of those great questions, and we'll now move on to the wind speed probabilities, one of the other products that is being produced by CPHC for the South Pac area. And so the wind speed probabilities are created for the 3 different levels, that tropical storm force, and then the marine storm force, and then the 64 knot, the hurricane force winds. And then also you can find tropical storm force wind speed probabilities also on JTWC under their login site from that site right there. I don't know if Ash, if those are being created separately, if they're all being created together through CPHC, JTWC, if you knew that. I didn't exactly know, but JTWC does have also some wind speed probabilities up on their behind login page.
I don't know the answer for that. I speculate that they're the same. It's just that they put them on their PSOL site because that's actually it's protected by password, but it's not behind their Navy site, which has much stronger security on it and can only be gotten access from DoD. So they put those on that site for broader use by their constituency of customers that need to get at those products that can't get to the DoD site. But I've got a meeting later this. I'll ask Brian. I'm not 100%, and that's speculation on my part. But I would, having worked at JTWC in the past, I would speculate that that's what's up there is the exact same product, just up on their site. Over.
Yeah, Ash, I would also speculate that too, because it only started, I think, about 2 years ago. If you go back into the storm archive on the JTWC site, you can only go back, I believe, until maybe 2019 to get the tropical storm force wind probabilities.
And that's when we started that for Westpac as an experimental product. So they probably have been archiving that since then. Over.
Yeah. Thanks, Ash. And so how are these tropical storm force or the wind speed probabilities derived? And so they're derived by using a Monte Carlo simulation. So it takes 1,000 different alternative tracks based off of the current, off the current forecast, and then it does 1,000 different alternative, realistic alternative tracks to determine the wind speed probabilities. And so let me get this to play. Here we go. And so they recently just did, we had them run one for a South Pac system. So you can see all the different lines of those 1,000 different runs. And then from there, they try to, they look at it to see at what point, how many of these 1,000 runs had tropical storm force winds at this time frame, right? And so if a point on American Samoa was saying that there's a 34% chance of tropical storm force winds over the next 5 days, that means that 340 of these 1,000 tracks had tropical storm force winds reaching, let's say, Pongo Pongo in the next 5 days. And so they run that after every forecast package, after every JTWC warning package. They run this 1,000 alternative tracks to try to determine what the wind speed probabilities are at a certain point. And so when we're looking at the wind speed probabilities, you're going to have to remember that these are point forecasts, and you can't really, you shouldn't say that there's 30 to 40% chance of tropical storm force winds across Tutuila in the next 5 days. It's really, you need to look at the point and say that it's the point forecast there. And so these also, they also take in the errors over the past 5 years, and the size of the system is also incorporated when they run this Monte Carlo simulation. And so here's just one also showing in the Westpac what it looks like. And so this system, you'll see that it's a lot cleaner looking. It already, it likely had a already tighter cluster, a higher confidence in that track and in the speed or in the intensity, right? And that's why when we look at it, you can really see, the different wind speed intensities there, opposed to when we look at the American Samoa one that was from TC Amos back in that 2015 or 2016 timeframe. It was still more in this development stage. Also, South Pacific systems, right, have a tendency to be a little bit more disorganized, especially in the first couple of days, right? And so it was likely that the forecasts and that those models had a higher level of uncertainty with them. And so you might ask yourself, why are we using them? And so it was found that the wind speed probability graphics help to show that uncertainty in that wind field forecast a little bit better than a deterministic forecast would be. It also helps to give a lot longer lead times than a deterministic forecast would also. And so they can be used for both the general public and the EMs, as long as, both of those parties understand probabilities a little bit better. And then before we get into the time of arrival graphics, we can just open it up to a couple questions on the wind speed probabilities. And so on here, I brought it back to the page that has the example for that TC Herald that is being used right now for the surveys.
Leanne, just to verify, all of these are all updated at the same time, 4 times a day for. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So following the issuance of that JTWC warning package, then these will get kicked off the track and error cone, and then the wind speed probabilities, and then also when we get to these time of arrival graphics.
Okay, thank you. Is there a way for us to also see the several tracks, rather like the video that you showed, and rather than this format?
No, so I had to go back. I asked, we had the 2 examples. We had a lane example and then that example from the Westpac. And so I went back and asked, I forget what his name is right now, but the group that developed those simulations, if you have systems that you'd like to look at from the past, we can ask him to do those. He just did Amos just because. So if you have a list of ones that you'd like to look at just to see how those probabilities would have been derived or what it would have looked like, we can go back and ask him.
Oh, okay. Or we can just utilize the ones that you're providing for our upcoming outreach with our partners, our workshop with our partners.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
It's a good demonstration of uncertainties, just to show them about the uncertainties like you noted.
But if you have one that you would really like to see in addition to Amos, let me know and we can have him run it. He said it doesn't take too long because he has the code ready.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to recap, so these are created right after all of the JTWC warning goes out, and then it is done for the tropical storm, and then hurricane force wind speeds, and it is a cumulative thing. So if you're looking at this one, it's for the 120 hours. So it's saying over the next 5 days, at this point, there is X percentage possibility of tropical storm, in this case, tropical storm force winds, right? I believe you also can get it where it's broken down by the different 12-hour periods also.
Okay.
But you just have to remember which one you're looking at. Like this one on the screen right now, where it says, for the 120 hours of the 5 days, it's going to be that cumulative. It's not saying, from days 1 to 5, there's this percentage. It's over those 5 days, right?
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. You have any questions, Nathaniel?
All right, awesome.
I guess one question would be, when you do the warning package, right, is that when the JTWC has a TCFA or right when they name it?
No,
They
it
have
Not
has to
plan on
be on
naming it,
the,
but-
so these graphics won't be created with a TCFA. It has to be when they start doing those actual warnings, when they
Okay.
have the forecast and the forecast points with it.
And it's Fiji that will name our systems, not JTWC.
So, right, and so these are all done off of the JTWC forecast. So it could not be named by Fiji yet, but if JTWC has a track out for it, a forecast track out for it, then these graphics from CPHC will run. And then I will bring up, for the hurricane conference, they are proposing that these, CPHC is proposing that these graphics to be housed on your individual websites, opposed to getting them from the HFO website. And so we'll have to see that from the hurricane conference, how that's going to move forward, just under the idea that they don't want, RSMC Nandi to think that RSMC Honolulu is stepping over bounds, right? So
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
yeah, and so then the last product that CPHC is producing off of those JTWC warning packages are these time of arrival graphics. And so these are only created for tropical storm force winds. They're not created for the 50 knot or the hurricane force winds, but it does use that same Monte Carlo method. It uses that same Monte Carlo method where they're running those 1,000 realistic alternate forecasts to determine this time of arrival. And so it's used as a decision-making tool to try to decide when to begin and to complete evacuations or finish other precautionary measures, right? And so they do two different time of arrival graphics. They do a most likely and then also an earliest time of arrival graphic. So the most likely time of arrival graphics, it takes those 1,000 runs, and then for the most likely, 50% of these runs said that tropical storm force winds would be starting in this graphic, right, be starting at 2 p.m. Samoan time, right? So 500 of those runs said that. And so this graphic would be most likely used for people that are willing to risk not having all their preparations done before the storm arrives. Or I liked how John Bravender put it one time. It's like, if you're looking at you need to drive somewhere, you need to go somewhere. Like, is it okay if you get there like a little bit late? Or is it like you need to catch a plane and you need to get there? So this one is like, oh, I can show up to my friend's house, a little bit later than the proposed time. Opposed to this earliest time of arrival graphic. Earliest reasonable time of arrival for the tropical storm force winds, which is doing that same Monte Carlo simulation, but it has 10% of the time it had this onset starting at this certain point. So 100 of those 1,000 alternate realistic forecast simulations showed, the time of arrival here at 2 p.m., opposed to, I believe the other one was about like here, right? And so this is used for those people that do have that really low tolerance for risk, or like if you're trying to catch a plane, you can't really be 10 minutes late to catching your plane, right? Because then you'll miss it, type of thing. So you just have to decide, do you have a higher risk or you have a higher tolerance or a lower tolerance for when things need to be done. And so that most likely is half of those tracks show the wind speeds, tropical storm force winds onset at that time. Earliest reasonable would be only 10% showed those having the onset of tropical storm force winds at that time. And so those are the three different things that three different graphics that CPHC is producing experimentally off of the JTWC forecasts. So does anybody have any questions about the time of arrival graphics?
Leanne, can you go back to the other one, please? This is most likely a flight.
Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. We're actually excited about this one because we get a lot of questions, not only from our partners, but from the people like, oh, what time are you expecting the winds? You know, or like anytime. So we're really excited about this one. You know, since you guys have been, especially with Ash online, you guys have been doing a lot of these graphics. What is the skill so far with this? Does it do real well with regards to the onset of winds and?
Well, I mean, it's based off of all those realistic runs, and so, you know, I think if the initial forecast has a higher confidence in it, these are also going to show a higher confidence, right? Once the forecast, the initial forecast has a lower confidence, they have a greater model spread also with their alternative runs, then this also is going to show a lower confidence in the actual timing.
So we wouldn't use this for
So,
the
this Hans. So the dotted line, so that's the earliest, and then the solid line is the most likely.
No, so they're individual products, and so the
Okay.
dashed line, I believe, is showing the like a 12-hour interval or 6-hour interval, opposed to the 12-hour with the solid line.
Gotcha.
So the most likely and the earliest time of arrival are going to be on two separate.
Two separate. Two separate products. Okay. All right. Thanks.
And then one other thing on this one, so you can look at it, you can have it just have the time of arrival on it, right, without the background, without the wind speed probability in the background, or you can show them together.
I think
Okay. Thank you.
Eleanor and folks, this is Ashley. So definitely this is a product where we tend to take the color off of the graphic depending on who we're talking to reduce the amount of confusion. But, definitely consider that as you talk to your customer base and be cognizant of who you're going to be sharing that with as to, because with the colors, with the colors, it does introduce a little bit of confusion. Whereas when Leanne showed them the other graphic, I can speak to it. If you just have that graphic, that's pretty clear that you're giving an indication of most likely time of arrival at different places in time. And then you can do your outreach to sort of teach them where this graphic comes from and how it originates. But we tend to try to use this graphic more so than the colorized graphic. But again, depending on who we're providing the brief to. Over. Sorry, Leanne.
No, great. Thank you for the addition.
What do you recommend?
For social media, what Ash and also Leanne, what were some of the graphics from these ones that you guys found had more response or interaction from the public with?
I'm trying to think back from Lane. Obviously the track graphic gets a lot of interaction, but with these ones, I can't remember now, but I think they're very helpful, for your preparation, right?
So primarily from social media, it's the track graphic that we tend to use a lot. This graphic, I know that John, when he talks to the emergency managers, just prior to, for us, CPHC wise, just we're crossing 155, he gives a brief that he includes this specific graphic in, and it's very useful for the emergency managers. And then he provides it in each of the updates that he provides to the emergency managers, because they can then begin to start to start their decision-making processes depending on when they're going to see certain onset of winds, whether that's going to be gale force, storm force, hurricane force winds. Does that get the answer? Over.
Yeah. Those, Ash, you've already shared some of the best practices that you guys use there at HFO and CPHC, and we really appreciate any other best practices that you guys have found, especially for the different graphics, and what's really gotten a lot of response, or what have caused your residents or visitors to take action. So thank you.
Another thing with these time of arrival graphics too, like for EMs, you could use it in, from warning to warning, seeing how the timing is shifting, right? Is there, is the system having a higher confidence and each package is saying 2 p.m. this time, the tropical storm force onset is here? Or is it, kind of shifting back and forth? And so that can help to also explain a little bit of uncertainty in the forecast.
Okay, and so even this has also been really helpful as well for the forecasters, right, or for the CPHC forecasters to on the timeline of the products that they issue, right?
I'll defer to Ash for product issuance of, say, tropical storm watch or warning, hurricane watch or warning.
Yeah.
Well, Eleanor, I have to thank you for your forgiveness. I was looking at a text when you asked that question, so if you could repeat it.
Yeah, we were just trying to say, because one of our challenges that we've always had internally as well, and so we're kind of very excited about these graphics is the timeline. When we issue different products, watch warnings, the weather service products. So is this one of the main things that you guys look at, the CPHC forecasters, in issuing your watches, warnings, and HLS? Because we also don't have a TCP, so.
So I think it's a mixed scenario there. I mean, clearly this is a product that's used to brief the emergency managers, and I already spoke to the, as soon as we start issuing an advisory package in the CPHC AOR, much like in your area of responsibility, it would be the same. This product will begin to get generated, and for a lot of our storms, they come across 145 from EastPac, so there's already advisories being generated. So, but as soon as it comes into the CPHC AOR, if it's a new storm and we start an advisory package, this product will begin to be made. If it's coming through EastPac, again, we'll receive that storm from NHC. Now, the time of arrival graphics, I think only begins to be made
The warnings, yeah.
I think it's when a warning or a watch, when a WAWA watch or warning is put up, but the wind speed probabilities are made all the time. So you'll get a wind speed probability for storm that's coming across 145, but this product only gets produced, once it's known that it's going to have an impact on, there'll be an impact on the islands. So I think the forecasters in general, this is a byproduct of their they've already put out their they've already put out the package. Product runs as the package is being done. Now the forecasters, I think, I'm not going to speak for each one, but I think each of the forecasters would go back and look through the past advisory package and products as they're generating the new package 6 hours later, or if they've got a shift to doing some type of intermediate level step. I don't know that answers the question, but I think for the forecasters, they've issued an advisory package, and then they would go back and look at some of the derived products. This is a derived product, later as they get ready to start the new package. Over.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a call.
Ask your question, Dora.
Oh, sorry, no, I was asking about the time of arrival. You know, it's not shaped like a cone, so like, what's that area?
So it's that same area as the wind speed probability.
Oh, okay, so it's just, okay.
Yeah, and so if the tighter, yeah, so the tighter that area is, you know, there's a higher confidence already in the forecast. If you start to see the wind speeds flare out, then there's a lower confidence also. And then it's also some of that area is, they do take into account the size of the system also, if you've got a large system or a small system too.
You guys have any more questions?
So can you show the products?
How often do you guys issue this product? It's right after JTWC.
So this one also comes out after those advisory packages, but I'll have to double check also if it is only if there is a watch or warning up or not. I'll double check on exactly for the time of arrival graphics, but it should be created after the, you know, the synoptic time JTWC warning.
Yeah, Leanne, I'm checking on that to just because it's odd. I've never seen one of these time of arrival graphics for a storm, you know, that's out in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, I'm not, see for this one, like, right, obviously American Samoa wouldn't have a watch or warning up with this, right? Harold is well far to your southwest and moving well far to your south, right? So I think they're just not advertised, right, if you're not having a watch or warning up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Leanne. We don't have any questions right now, but I'm pretty sure if we do, we'll reach out.
Okay, awesome. So
It's Patrick. I'm sorry I disappeared before, but I'm back now, hopefully for good. So my name is Patrick Chaffee. I know I missed my own introduction earlier. I'm the new ERS at The Rock with Leanne, and I started about 4 weeks ago now. It's been 1 month already. So I think I've met most of you before, but just in case, I was a meteorologist in charge at the CWSU in Seattle before coming here. And I began my career as a DoD civilian in Yuma, Arizona. And I've kind of moved around to Colorado and California before Seattle and coming here. So I'm looking forward to meeting you in person someday. And today I'm here to talk to you about briefings and to give you some advice on how to do briefings and a few tips you can use for doing so. And then when I'm done, Leanne will also have some links for you as well. So at any point you have any questions, feel free to interrupt or just yell your question out and I'll do my best to answer it. So without further rambling, which is also what I'll talk about here in just a second, let's get to it. So of a few basics, a few web pages, and a few tools you can use coming up here. So most importantly, it's important to know who your audience is. For me, I find that the most useful. You really want to know who you're speaking to so you can gauge your talk accordingly. Because if you're in a room full of meteorologists, you can be more technical than you can be with a group of fifth graders, you know, talking about weather as a career. You know what I mean? So it's very important to make sure you know who you're speaking to and make sure you know what they need. You have to know what their needs are in order to provide the information that they can use for their operations. So it could be the FAA, it could be your local media, local government, emergency management, or it could be your brother or sister, mom or dad. You know when one of your family members asks you what the weather is, you're not going to talk about vorticity or, you know, a deepening trough over the Pacific. You're going to talk about, yeah, it's going to be cold, it's going to be wet, it's going to be warm, or whatever. So you want to make sure you know what the needs of your partners are so you can formulate your answers and your presentations accordingly. And then, of course, what are you trying to convey? What exactly do you want to get across to your partner? What's most important? So once you know what their needs are, you understand what's most important to them, and then you figure out how to convey that message and how to give that to them without giving them too much extra or too little at the same time. So I have a small video here I'm going to play first, and then I will kind of just do a quick recap of what she has to say.
So you just found out you're giving a presentation. Congratulations. Now begins the work. To prepare for a presentation, there's a number of things that we need to do. The first is knowing your audience. Who is this presentation for? In the National Weather Service, we give presentations to a number of different audiences, from children at school talks, to the general public for spotter training, and to emergency managers and all types of media. There are 3 reasons why it's important to know who your audience is. The first is how long your presentation needs to be. If I'm presenting to a group of 2nd graders, I'm not going to stand up there and talk for an hour straight. I'm going to keep my words pretty short and then let them participate. If I'm giving a spotter talk, though, to a group of adults, my presentation can be a little bit longer, and I can talk a little bit more in depth about the weather. The second reason that you need to know who your audience is that it dictates how you will dress. If I'm going to give a school talk, I'm going to be pretty casual. In fact, I can probably even go in jeans. If I'm going to be giving a presentation at a conference, I want to wear a suit or a dress, something that looks nice and I still feel comfortable in. The third reason you need to know who your audience is that it also dictates the tone that you're going to use when you give your presentation, whether you're serious or whether you're much more conversational. If I'm speaking to kids or the general public, I can be much more conversational. In fact, it's better if I'm conversational because it engages that audience. But if the topic that I'm talking about is more serious, especially if I'm doing decision support services, whether that's on-site or to a bunch of emergency managers, my tone will be more serious.
Okay, any questions so far?
Thank you, Patrick. We don't have any questions, but there's a comment. Just a comment on, go ahead.
Those are, well, because they're basic stuff, it's what we've been practicing all along. And, you know, getting to know the audience, those are the questions that we ask ourselves. And then we customize our presentations and our outreaches. So, thank you. Good reminder.
Yeah,
So
no,
Oh,
yeah, I
go ahead.
understand a lot of this may be, a lot of this is probably some recapping, and some of it is common sense for sure. So yeah, it's kind of more of a review than, but hopefully covering all the bases, maybe we'll pick up a couple new things. But yeah, some of this may be a review here.
Patrick, I do have a question for the coaching link. Is that available to all NOAA employees?
Yes, it is. I believe that one is actually part of PCU 3. And if you go to the Commerce Learning Center and just search PCU, you'll see PCU 3 and you'll be able to find it. It'll actually show up. And if you go to Open Curriculum, it'll be one of the ones listed. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And just a comment on the second point that was made on it is dictating how you'll be able to dress. I think one comment that needed to be added on there was, really depends on where you're at also.
Yeah, that should be noted. Yeah, regional differences and where you are for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, knowing where you're at.
You can wear aloha at a serious, briefing there in Hawaii.
Yeah. Yeah, because we don't wear suits, but also even when we go to the second grade class, we wear our pulitasis or stuff, not jeans.
Yeah.
That
That
may
makes
be
sense.
okay there. Yeah, no, that was just it.
Fine. I know even my first day coming into work here, I didn't know what to wear, and I realized I'm like, I don't think I need like a long, like a shirt, like a suit or anything. I think I'm good with just the, shorts are fine.
Yeah.
And your slippers.
Yeah. I like it. Yes, that sounds nice, actually. That's a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. All right, so yeah, that was pretty basic, and Renee did a good job of covering that. So yeah, that's a PCU module, PCU 3. You can find that on there. And so up next, so again, this is another recap. Pretty much what we've already talked about. So you want to make sure that, they're tailored to your partner's needs. So what is going to happen and what impacts are you going to focus on? When is it going to happen? So again, just like the graphics that Leanne showed, time of arrival, of course, for a tropical system, or time of arrival for another weather feature, it's very important so they know. When is the highest likelihood of flooding? When will the tropical cyclone reach this area? That sort of a thing. And then what different impact levels will occur? Where is it going to be? Are we really concerned about just the coastline? Are we concerned about inland or pretty much everywhere? And again, that dictates on where you are too. Obviously, if you're on an island versus the mainland, or an island that has higher elevations, or if it's just all very low altitudes, then you're going to have different impacts. And of course, confidence plays a big role. Coming from where I was at the FAA, confidence level was very important to them for their decision making, and so that can play a big role for an emergency manager, of course, as well, or any other government official too. So as it clearly states on here, think like your partner. That's probably the best advice you could ever keep in the back of your mind while you're briefing to a partner. So just try to come where they're coming from. Try to understand where they're coming from. So I think that's pretty much the main point to drive home there.
Just a question on or what are some great ways have you guys approached expressing uncertainties without sounding like, oh, we really don't know, I'll come back again without sounding like we really don't know, we're unsure, especially when briefing the emergency managers and media.
Yeah, that's a tough call. So for me personally, when I've been in those situations where you have, the operations manager of the FAA, the operations floor manager of the FAA looking at you, or the supervisory traffic manager in my case as well, we need to know what your confidence level is, that the winds are going to shift at 16Z out of the north. And you're like, oh, okay. So for me, what I would say is here's a scenario. I showed them a map. I showed them what was coming in, give them a visual picture of what was going on, and say this is going to happen one of two ways. If this slows down at all, it's going to delay the timing. But right now, based on what I see, I'm fairly confident that this is going to happen. On the other hand, though, I would also say in this scenario, this is a low confidence scenario. I've seen this happen before. And all the different times this has happened, it's a low confidence event. It's not you kind of say in your own way that it's not scientifically easy to forecast this with a high degree of confidence. So you can use techniques like that by giving visuals and just explaining that you may not have a high confidence level, but you've at least seen this happen, And here are some of the ways they can break down. And from that information, they can kind of make the decisions they have to make without making yourself look totally, oh, I have no idea what's going to happen. But like you said, there's ways to, that's kind of one of the ways I did it personally. Leanne may have better, more information on that, of her methods too, but based on her time here. But for me, that's what I've used. Not to put Leanne on the spot or anything, but.
Yeah, I think one thing also, right, is talking about that trend, right? I know you guys do it a lot, especially when you do your packages, right? You talk about the differences from model run to model run. Like, you know, if you're seeing something happening in each run, you know, you're going to have that higher confidence in your forecast. Or, you know, you've got each run to run, if it's changing, you know, you just explain that there is a lower confidence, but worst case scenario that you may want to be prepared for, right? And then going back to the tropical graphics, you know, using some of those, the wind speed probabilities, or even those time of arrival, like we're talking, if there's a lot of change in time to time, you know, you can say there is a lower confidence in this occurring. But what is, you know, they need to think about what their risk threshold is, right?
Cool, thanks, Leanne. Yeah, so to summarize, keeping it simple and avoiding jargon are very important. So, you know, back to what we were saying before, obviously, you know, if you know your audience, it's pretty easy to do these things. You don't want to get into a technical explanation of the atmosphere or vertical soundings or satellite features or, you know, things of that nature. But you can still explain them in ways that they can understand without having to refer to, you know, all of our meteorological jargon that we like to use. And the same goes for acronyms. Of course, we love acronyms. Our agency, we have new acronyms every day. Since I moved here, I've learned at least 30 new acronyms just in the past 3 weeks. You know, so I'm still catching up. So it's important, if you're going to use them, at least explain what they are, because you may be speaking with someone who's not familiar with our acronyms or with the agency at all. You know, sometimes we use them all the time comfortably around others and we don't realize it. And if you don't know, it's always okay to say you don't know, because it's better than just trying to make something up out of thin air. And I found that people respect that more when you can just say, I do not know. I'm not sure how to answer that, but let me do some research, talk to some colleagues, and I'll get back to you with more information. And I find that people really respect that when you can do that. So being clear and concise, or as the smiley face says, just keep it simple, which is the best smiley face ever. That's great. Kudos to Leanne for putting these slides together too, by the way. So last but not least, so Richard Brundage, he owns his own media educational company, basically based out of Kansas City, Missouri. And he's also featured in PCU 3, Section 5. And you can pretty much find almost all of his entire course in the PCU module on the Learning Center website. So this diagram is from one of his main points that he likes to drive home when he's teaching people how to prepare for a media interview. So my quick little 2-minute overview of it doesn't really do it justice, so I encourage you to go to the PCU 3 Section 5. But I think it was important enough to mention today, just to make sure you're familiar with it. And you may have already seen this already, but it's still an important thing to focus on, because I think he does a really good job of diagramming and explaining just how to handle a media interview. So his technique was pretty straightforward. In the first 4 seconds, when a reporter asks you a question, or whoever you're trying to brief or is interviewing you, asks you a question, you can answer it in 4 seconds. 4 seconds, very quick. You can give a quick little soundbite answer. And the point of that is that you're not giving a long, drawn out, convoluted answer. It's very quick, concise, to the point. And then with the reporter or the person asking the question's name, use that in your response, because it actually shows you're connecting with the reporter and you're connecting with those, you know, listening to the interview. It shows a sign of respect when you use someone's name. that you know who they are. You know, I can say, well, Leanne, I know that the radar is down right now, but technicians are working on it. You know, you can say things very quickly, and by using their name, it really helps. And then also important is to have two themes that you can bridge to. So if the radar is down, I can say, yes, technicians are working on it. That's one theme that I have. Another theme that I have is, yeah, this radar is up 99% of the time, you know, or something of that nature. You'd have your themes picked out ahead of time. You want to make sure you have, another point that he makes is that you have your themes picked out ahead of time. So it could be in a SDM or an ESDM or in a disaster operating manual was their example. And if you watch the PCU, you'll see them discuss this in greater detail than I can cover here, because then I'd be going on for a long time. But basically you keep, no matter what the reporter asks you, you can keep referring back to these two themes. And so they may be trying to get you to say something that you don't want to say. So you have your two themes and you keep recycling those. And you just use those themes, regardless of, not regardless, but every time they ask you a different question, because it's going to be the same variation. There's a variation of the same question is all the reporters are going to do. So that's another good technique you can use, and it's called the bridge technique, or bridging the gap. You know, you want to bridge that gap between you, the reporter, and the audience, or just you and the audience. And again, it's a great technique. And he has a lot of other techniques as well, so I highly encourage you, if you haven't watched it already, to go and watch, yeah, the PCU 3 Section 5. It's really good. I actually reviewed it this morning before this talk, and I forgot how good it was. It's been a little while since I had taken it, so they do a really good job at explaining it. It's hard to explain in just a few minutes here, but I highly encourage you to go check it out. So then lastly, I wanted to talk about some experiences I've had from where I came from. So I used to work at a CWSU, which is a good acronym, a Center Weather Service Unit, which you may or may not know. They're at every ARTC, Air Route Traffic Control Center, except for the one in Hawaii. The Hawaii Center is the only ARTC without a CWSU. I don't know why that is, but every other one has one. So you're embedded with the customer, you're embedded with the FAA, and the kinds of questions that they're going to ask, that they used to ask me, you know, are the winds going to be out of the north or the south? And if north, are they going to be greater than 10 knots? And things of that nature. And so when I would give a briefing to them about all the things listed on here, all of these questions, I had to be very clear and concise. And it's just another example of, I didn't talk about vorticity, I didn't talk about upper level divergence, I didn't talk about, you know, convergence zones, except for the Puget Sound convergence zone. That's another story. Or anything else of that nature. I just said, yeah, the winds are going to shift at this time, or the winds are going to be this strong, or thunderstorms are going to be in this area as opposed to this area, and keeping it clear and concise. And I threw a diagram of the Seattle-Tacoma Airport on here. Their runways run north to south, basically, 340, and 19. So just to show that they're very sensitive to tailwinds and headwinds. So that's why the 10 knots was such a big deal. If the winds were out of the north, they would change the airport configuration completely around. And I can give a whole separate presentation on that, but I won't ramble on. But my point is that in the middle of all of these things, trying to figure out what the ceilings are, the wind shift, the thunderstorms, then they come along and say, oh, so what about tomorrow morning, before you've already gotten through the first morning? And so those types of questions can come up when you're in a dynamic situation where, in your case, it could be a tropical system, and they're concerned about the winds, the flooding, and what's the aftermath going to be tomorrow? And are we going to have lingering thunderstorms or lingering showers in the area the day after as well, where you're just trying to get through the first part of the forecast, which is the cyclone itself, or something along that line. And so you want to make sure when you're handling all of these things, just to keep everything as quick and concise as possible. And so I thought I just wanted to bring a quick perspective of, of how this works in other settings. And one little quick story was, there was a day where We were waiting for Stratus to clear San Francisco. This is when I worked at the Oakland RC. And yeah, so I said 16Z, and 16Z came, and the clouds were still there. And 1630 was my next best forecast, and the clouds were still there. So finally at 1730, the clouds cleared. We had a lot of aircraft circling the airport, diverting to other airports. It was not a good forecast day. But you know, that was one of those things where I was keeping them informed as this was happening. I'm like, here's the trend. The trend is the clouds are not dissipating like I thought they were. And I kept the partner updated, and they were able to at least adjust accordingly. It wasn't ideal by any means, but the line of communication was still open, and that made a big difference. Even though it was a missed forecast overall, by keeping the partner informed, they still felt as if they were supported, even if it wasn't, you know, a perfect day. So that was just one of the many stories. And if you ever want to know any more, just shoot me a message. I can tell you many more good and bad forecast stories from aviation land. And I know I threw a lot at you in a short period of time, but I'm going to turn this over to Leanne now, and she's going to go over a bunch of links and tools for you. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
All right, thanks guys. Let me just forward to the actual screen we need to be on. All right, so thanks Patrick for all that great information. So now we'll just cover, this is just a couple useful sites. I've got the satellite imagery used here. You know, if you are giving a briefing, say from like a virtual webcam briefing, there are a handful of satellite places that you can pick up if you need, or share if you need to share the satellite to show what's going on. You know, the different model sites that you can go to are NOAA-NWS site, or the Tropical Tidbits one, or the Windy one. And then obviously the TC graphics that we just shared. And then from the JTWC collaboration site, that PSOL site, there's some other good graphics in there. And then the surface and streamline analyses that are either done by HFO, or you've got the Fiji one, and then you've got a pretty broad polar view Australia one that can be used. And so, I mean, this is just a really just quick list of some things that you can use. I think the key thing here is to remember that you only want to use graphics or data that your partners are really going to understand, right? Like Patrick was saying, probably don't show them that 500 millibar vorticity. Don't show them, other very technical things that are going to take a little bit longer to digest. So it's really just understanding who your partner is and what graphics they're going to understand. And I mean, I think you guys already do a great job of this with those briefings that you send out to the shipyard, or to when you're doing them with the Coast Week type of thing, or even in your WRN ambassador emails. It's just really understanding who your audience is, right? Is it the public, or is it the EMs, and what they are going to understand. And so then Patrick covered this. I'm pretty sure you probably have all taken it, as you're going through that IDSS, the PCUs 1 through 7, that all the briefing training from PCU 3 is pretty great. And, going back through that Unit 5 with Dick Brundage is also great. I know he was just there a couple years ago, but for the couple of you that have come since then, you can see a lot of the training from that Unit 5, that PCU Unit 5 for the Dick Brundage. And then the other thing that I did want to share was some of these briefing slides that I've been putting together. They do a little auto population for graphics. And so they're pretty useful. Like if you do have a TC in the area, so it's going to go to the JTWC site and grab that information. It'll go to some of the satellite imagery sites and grab those pictures and then put it all into these presentations. And then you can just update the text as you need it. I can't really run it right now since there aren't any active JTWC. There's no active tropical cyclones right now in the South Pack from JTWC, but it's pretty easy. You would go here, enter your storm number, and then you would hit update, and it would come in here. It'd pull the cyclone name and number. What advisory it is. It pulls all the Latin lawn. It can pull a graphic. We can decide which satellite imagery we want to use. It's got the JTWC forecasts. Something I'll work on for this season is getting those experimental graphics put into here if you guys would like to use this. And then it also, you know, pulls your seas, your marine forecast into it here. And so then I do have another one. I didn't click on the same link. I do have another one. This one's pretty standard that can be used at any point. So if you just hit update slides, what it's going to do, it's going to update the time, update some of these graphics in here, like the satellite links, the ASCAT, your WAWA map. And so why it runs, so you can see, you know, it updated the time here. We've got the current satellite imagery, the tropical South Pack imagery. We can work on getting a different, there's a site that has a little bit better satellite imagery. We can also put that in there, right? We've got the latest ASCAT, your WAWA map, and then it also pulls in your zone forecast here. This one would need a little bit of editing, right? You need to probably separate the days out. Right now it just pulls it straight in there and puts it in. And then same thing, it pulls that marine forecast also into there. So having tools ready, the main thing for this is really that, you know, you've got your in-office templates, or you have some of these briefing slides that PRH has helped put together. It's just having those ready, right? And so you're not fumbling around every time you're asked to give a briefing, right? And you're not trying to recreate it every time. And I know you guys already have some really great templates in place to use. But so with those two that I just shared, the one standard briefing, we've got the satellite, ASCAT, WAWA, the zone forecast on the marine. And so if you guys can think about any other static images you'd like to add in, or something else you'd like to add in, I can try to get that coded up there if you'd like to use these briefing packages. And then the same thing for the tropical cyclone one, if you think of any other sort of graphics that'd like to be added in there. I do still need to add the new TC graphics, so you'd have those time of arrival and the wind speed probability ones, and that cone graphic also in there. And so these are very similar to the ones that CPHC uses when they brief their emergency management partners as well. And then, so that's it. We're gonna do a 5-minute break right now. And the next thing up on our docket is to do some practice briefings with everybody. And talking with Eleanor just a little bit ago, I think what we're gonna do is have just the one person stay in the conference room, and then everybody else will leave. And what we're gonna have, that we're gonna record them, and they're gonna go to the training. We're gonna send them to the training center in Kansas City to Megan Taylor, and she'll help send some feedback also with it. Kind of like if you went to boot camp, I know your feedback together. But our scenario, if you can see it up on the screen, is that a high-profile dignitary, me, is coming on the next Hawaiian Airlines flight tomorrow on the 14th, and the governor's office will be hosting her through Saturday. And so planned events include a VA'a ride and a Fia night on Friday. And the governor's office is concerned about weather for Thursday night through Saturday, and especially rain, winds, and seas. And so the idea is that you guys can give a less than 5-minute brief to the governor, what you would tell the governor and the EOC for this high-profile dignitary's visit. That would be great. So we're going to take probably like a 5-minute break, come back at 11:30, and whoever wants to start can go.
Okay. Leanne, thank you. Before we do that, I just wanted to ask, you know how when you do your briefings on Tuesdays and Thursdays, can you go over some of the tools that you use when you're drawing on the stuff? Or can that be another time?
So when we're drawing on the things, that's only from the one specific website. Actually, let me go back to it.
Sorry.
No worries. So on this, it's this RAMB Sierra satellite page. They have embedded within that satellite page ability to draw on it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because we didn't know. We're like, oh, how did she draw on the stuff?
So this one, right, you can zoom around and then you can have a couple, you can add an overlay, you know, if you wanted to add, if you're using GOES, right, you could add some sort of lightning mapper to it, right? I'm not sure if there's really a little bit of lightning in that band to the north of you guys, or to the east of you guys, right? But then down here, there's a mouse draw feature, right? So you can.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh.
Yeah, so
yeah.
that's specifically on this RAM-B site. It's pretty nice. It does take a little bit of bandwidth sometimes to get things started, but if you get it loaded, it should work pretty well. I think it should be fine for you guys. And then the nice thing about,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, the nice thing is you can also flip over to Himawari pretty fast. You know, if you wanted to get, you know, a more Western view or a more Eastern view for you guys. And then it's got all the different, you know, all the different bands and some different color curves too.
Yeah.
And then
So,
another thing is you can, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. So, you know, from Google Meet, when you're doing the stuff on Google Meet, how are you, oh, so no, you're just sharing that screen.
Yep, just sharing this screen with it. So usually like on those briefing days, I'll have all of my links set up, right? If I'm not using a formal template or something and we're just going through it, I'll just have all the links set up at the top. So you're not trying to search for something, you just got them loaded and you just go from left to right, or if you read backwards, right to left, whichever way you like to go. And just have them in an order that you know, because it's, you know, there's nothing worse than watching the briefing and someone's like, oh, never mind, this one. Oh, wait, this one, right? So just, you just have them in order and you know, I'm going from, like in those Monday and Thursday briefings, you know, like I know I go Guam, Samoa, Hawaii, and I just have all the links set up in that way. And so you know where they are.
Awesome. You guys got it?
And then you want to make sure if you are doing something like that, right, I don't want to have it zoomed out like this, right? And then me being like, okay, well, Samoa's over here, right? And then talk about it like that. Like you want to make sure that it's zoomed in enough for people to see what's going on. Another thing would be like, you know, if we do show the streamline analysis,
Current conditions.
So we are showing the streamline analysis. We want to make sure it's not like, you know, you want to make sure it's not small on the screen like that. You want to make sure you zoom in to whatever is an appropriate size, right, for what you're showing. But I think those are really key things to remember, is just making sure the graphic that you're showing is coming across clear and that it makes sense to be using that also. And then also, if you do one that is just kind of a more ad hoc, you're not using a template, make sure everything is lined up and you're not fumbling around between sites.
Is there a keyboard shortcut for going between the tabs, or is just the mouse?
I'm not sure. I don't use keyboard shortcuts for that. I just use the mouse.
Okay.
To do the zooming in, I'll use that keyboard control +- but I feel like I personally have more control just using the mouse than a keyboard shortcut.
Oh, okay. Awesome.
Control tab.
Control tab. Okay, thank you. And so for these, what you have, useful sites, is that on the PR Rock part of the intranet?
No, all these sites are, yeah, well, I think I have them listed under our PR Rock site. Like if you click American Samoa, I'm pretty sure I have them listed. I'll get it updated if I don't have them listed.
Okay. So then I can just go ahead and just link it from our intranet page to wherever you have American. Okay.
All of the sites that I have here, except for that JTWC collaboration site, they're just public sites. You don't need to log in to anything. You don't need to be on the VPN or anything for them.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you, this is good to see you.
Leanne,
These
it's
guys are so excited to brief, to do the briefing.
Yes, Governor.
I think Ash has something that he's gonna say.
yeah, so I want to go back to the time of arrival graphics and a question that was asked that I did some digging here while we've been went on to the briefings. But the time of arrival graphics are created with every advisory package, and I think for me it's I've never used them unless we're in a warning scenario, watch warning scenario when there's something approaching the islands. But they are produced with every advisory package, regardless of whether there's a watch or warning or not. Because and they're produced in conjunction with the creation of the wind speed probability graphics. That's the backdrop that the time of arrival graphics are developed from. I just wanted to
oh, sorry, Ash.
I just wanted to clarify that because I had said that they were only, but I think it's, for me, it was expectation management. I've only ever used them with a watch and warning scenario, but they are out there to be used. I've never pulled them up and used them in that scenario when I went back and looked. But I did go back to NHC and clarify. Over.
What kind of?
Yeah, thanks, Ash. Yeah, so just as a reminder, that time of arrival graphic and the wind speed probabilities are run off that same 1,000 run Monte Carlo simulation.
Thank you, Ash. Thanks again.
All right, so let's meet back. So you guys have a couple minutes at least to think about where you're gonna show me on your islands. No. Let's meet back at 11:40. Whoever wants to be the first to go. Eleanor,